TSM. There's so many priority picks that it makes it, this is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to draft against Team Solo Mid, because it feels like just about everything is a priority pick for them. They're comfortable with pretty much any composition they can build around, regardless of what you ban away.
Yeah, and TSM has made a mistake, though, when they played the first week against Cloud9, that very first team. They actually messed up their draft and got out-drafted and lost. So TSM can out-draft themselves, honestly, and that's the mistake that a lot of teams are looking for. So Baron's going to get Bivon. TSM's going to pick Grace here, because, again, Vox is good against Grace, and there's no really hard counter to Grace besides that Vox. So I think TSM is most likely going to pick up the Grace, and that's going to leave Hammers open to either picking, they sometimes pick Glaive as the first pick, that could come out, or Grumpjaw here. I think Glaive or Grumpjaw could probably be the options that Hammers is looking forward to.
We'll see what they are going to opt for in this one. Grumpjaw definitely feels like a strong pick here, but you know, Grumpjaw always feels like a strong pick, and it is going to be the lock-in in the end. Now, looking towards the bans, where do you go as Hammers here, Bacon? Like, how do you try and disable TSM?
Well, I mean, you're going to have to try and get something that can deal with the Grace. They're going to pick up that Grumpjaw for the early game jungle. I would really like to see them grab a Kestrel for themselves. It is something that Starting All Over has played quite a bit of. It was kind of his fallback hero last season when Ringo was banned against him. He generally ended up defaulting to the Kestrel more often than not.
Yeah, I think Lyra's going to party ban here, because Lyra Grumpjaw is a pretty strong composition. And I think that with TSM, you know, you want to basically deny one healer and take the other healer, which is Grace. So potentially a Lyra ban could come out here, or they want to deny maybe, you know, a hero that counters, you know, what they want to pick. So Lyra's going to come out here. So let's see what Hammers. I think we're here. They're going with the Dajio Grumpjaw, which is very strong. I think now Ryan makes good sense here, because Ryan Grace is going to completely counter a Dajio and Grumpjaw. It's going to be a very strong pick into this composition, and they can round out with like a lane Glaive, and that's going to be extremely strong and deadly combination into Hammer's comp here.
Yeah. And is there any argument to say Batiste could be a strong jungle? Oh, it locks it in before I finish my sentence. But I mean, specifically the Grace Batiste combo, we've seen how terrifying that is to try and deal with in an early game, which is the thing that you pick Grumpjaw for, is getting that early game.
Yeah, it's Grumpjaw versus Grace Batiste. This is going to be a really interesting early game matchup because, again, both sides are going to be looking to be very aggressive.
So, in this draft right now, all of Best Chuck's most played heroes are actually banned away from him. Do we think this is now Best Chuck kind of being exploited? Does he have any fallbacks? I mean, Jewel, is that a strong pick here?
Yeah, I think they're experimenting here because Jewel, it could work though. I mean, if Jewel and Grace, you know, double combo their stun, that'd be very deadly. And Hammers here have a lot of options. They can do Arden, Fortress, Lance. There's a lot of good options here, and that's a very strong combination from Hammers here.
All right, these compositions are going to be interesting coming into this game. I'm curious to see how this one is going to pan out. Quite a bit of CC on both sides of the table, but quite a lot of damage as well. So these team fights could well be very explosive. How are we feeling about these two compositions then, gentlemen? Do we feel like either team has an advantage coming in, and like, what are the win conditions going to be?
I really like the draft that Hammers put together here. I feel like that draft-wise, they have a pretty sizable advantage. The Jewel is a little bit of a wild card pick. It'll be interesting to see how that works out into the composition. But the early game of Adagio and Grumpjaw, assuming Adagio rotates down to help, but Lance Grumpjaw in the jungle, even as a duo, is still incredibly strong. This early game jungle matchup is going to be so important.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch as well.
Yeah, I like what TSM is trying out, and I think the synergy they'll be able to pull it off. Jewel is actually really strong with her inherent heroic perk with the armor plating and shield plating that she gets. And late game, when she gets level 12, she has 175 natural base armor with her perk. And with Grace's heal, she's going to be super tanky. So I think with the combos with Batiste and Jewel and stuns and ordains, I feel like TSM is going to pull up some really cheeky stuff.
All right, well, Best Chuck's best played heroes are going to be banned away, and his fallback is Jewel. Let us know what you think of the crazy Jewel pick using that hashtag Vainglory8 on Twitter. Get involved in that conversation. Let us know who you're voting for as well. But with that said, it's time to head on into TSM up against Hammers Esports.
Thank you very much, Munchables, and what a treat we have for ourselves today. TSM versus Hammers, perhaps not the rivalry that you would expect of old times here at Scoundrel, but today with these compositions, I'm expecting something juicy.
I think we need to look at these compositions in detail as well, because TSM have drafted something very unique. And it is a very heavy dive composition. Actually, Chuck is going to go with Flash X. This is what Grace can do. Grace can be really aggressive early in the jungle, and it looks like Best Chuck is trying to make that rotation with Flash X because it's very difficult to trade into a Grace at level 1. She's almost untradeable in a lot of ways. This is why you can be so aggressive with her, especially with that high base movement speed. But they are just kind of trying to pull Starting All Over down from lane as well.
Yeah, we'll get engaged on by Flash X here. Here comes Playboy Afro with the root. Flash X happy to tank that damage up. Grace, of course, very tanky, especially when she gets her Benediction shield going. TSM, very interesting start to this game, very much wanting to go for that level 1 fight with Vonsi coming on in. He's going to provide the damage. Playboy Afro goes down for first blood, and TSM, they're starting the slaughter. Flash X to escape. Archaic should go down here, and it will be Best Chuck to secure the kill, and it all just comes tumbling down. TSM stack the cards and then tumble them over.
Got a really good level 1 with the dual Thunder Strike, obviously a lot of damage there, but I also want to point out Flash X's build, which is a very unique Grace build that not everybody picks up. He starts Weapon Blade, which makes his heroic perk hit harder because it has a weapon power scaling, and obviously his A, which triggers an immediate heroic perk hit, also hits harder at level 1. And if you think about where hammers actually come online as a composition, it's probably level 2, because you want the Agent of Fire into Agent of Wrath, you want to have the Githian Wall and Impale online, and Grumpjaw wants to have both his A and his B. So TSM force a fight at level 1, knowing that they are stronger. They force a double invade, bringing members of Hammers to them because they can't afford to give up their jungle, and they take that fight when they knew they were stronger, especially given the build on Grace. I really love that early pressure from TSM because it forced the issue from Hammers, and they couldn't respond, and they wanted to wait until they were level 2, especially on Adagio. Couldn't get it.
As soon as you start to think, Scoundrel, that 2.6 might be coming, you know, the meta may just be locked in stone, that everything has become stale, everyone's going to just follow the same positions at the beginning of the game. TSM throw this curveball, and what this curveball has enabled is a 1,000 gold lead at 2.5 minutes. That's insane. Hardly ever happens in a competitive game, and if you think about where that gold is, it's on Best Chuck and it's on Von C, which means that they are 500 gold ahead of their counterparts. They're going to be able to get these early items. You see Best Chuck already building that heavy still there. Von C with the Eclipse Prism double crystal bit. They can actually look to just snowball this game so heavily from this point, and this is exactly why Hammers have started this 3-man rotation. They've done this once already. This is going to be their second. Starting All Over decides not to commit due to the fact that Jewel is back in the lane, but Hammers realize that they are at huge risk to losing control of this game, so they're going to try and take it back now with a 3-man push into the lane.
I think a lot of it came from Starting All Over missing about 10 CS behind Best Chuck. I know you saw when he started to get some CS back under his belt. Oh wow, that's a big, big, big move. And I was about to touch on this, Dalsy. I think that Lance completely counters TSM. I think it was the perfect way to end the draft here from Hammers, because Githian Wall shuts down the only way TSM have to get to Adagio. If you commit as a unit onto starting, if Githian Wall knocks Jewel back, knocks Flash back, and then sort of even if Batista's close, which he isn't.
Best Chuck's rooted here. That's going to be Flash X going in. TSM should be able to get out here. Bit of a dive from Hammers just to keep starting in position. Yeah, no, I think that we talked about this during the draft, and, you know, if Starting All Over is able to get his fire down, throw out a Verse of Judgment, then this dive from TSM is going to be shut down immediately. The only way they do that is if Playboy Afro is on point with his Githian Walls.
He needs to be every single time Jewel leaps into the air, because realistically, let's think about the optimum time to use a Githian Wall for Playboy. The only time, if I were Playboy, the only time I would be using a Githian Wall was when I see Jewel leap. Unless Jewel is right next to Adagio without having to leap, the only time I'd be using it is trying to knock Jewel away, because the only person that's going to threaten my Adagio this game is more than likely going to be the Jewel, because she's the one that's looking to blow him up. So Playboy Afro needs to keep his eyes on that Jewel jump, making sure he's using that Githian Wall every time it happens. Big engage onto Archaic here.
Is dead for all rights as TSM dives in for the final kill. Let's talk about items real quickly, because if you just envision the late game team fights that's going to happen, if we make it to late game, perhaps mid game is perhaps a better starting point for this conversation. Crucible is practically a must for both these teams. Obviously, Verse of Judgment, everyone knows the damage that can be outputted with the Verse of Judgment, but think about Von C's Fearsome Shade here and how impactful that can be to Hammers and actually shutting them down and their damage output.
That's really interesting. So you talk about the Verse of Judgment. When you have got a dive composition like this, especially both a Jewel and a Grace, you need to have either reflex blocks or crucibles ready to block the Verse of Judgment, because you two specifically, Grace and Jewel, are going to be incredibly vulnerable to it. The Fearsome Shade is an interesting point that you bring up though, Dalsy. I don't know how impactful it'll be unless Archaic is the one trying to make the engage. It would be very good at bailing TSM out if the dive goes wrong, however. It would shut down a potential engage from Hammers. Here we go. That's an engage.
Yeah, it is an engage. Playboy Afro able to escape the Ordained, but there it is. There's that Fearsome Shade. And exactly that, Scoundrel. It forces a dive away from TSM so they can just do work. Now, I think the Fearsome Shade can also be impactful to try and stop Starting All Over's Verse of Judgment, but we'll just have to see. Playboy Afro is going to pop that fountain, manages to stay alive here, but TSM already 4-0. They are snowballing.
I think you can use it. You are very right. I think you can use it on the Verse of Judgment to stop
going to come
the
in
channel.
for Starting All Over. This is a crazy gaming, Scoundrel. We're trying to do some analysis here, but it's going to be Starting All Over, ruining that for us. Bonzi goes down as well. Flash X will be able to walk away. No, he won't, because level 6 on Archaic comes out, and that's going to be a nom 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 and a dead Flash X right there.
Oh man, what a return for Hammers. They actually almost leveled the golds to within 700 as well, because I believe they got a couple of shutdown kills onto Vonsi and Flash X, or at least they got some return gold. Really good move by them. They're going to start to push into their jungle. Best Chuck NA right now is 3-0-1, working towards, I think, is going to be either breaking point. I don't imagine it's going to be a Serpent's Mask, but he's obviously got that Book of Eulogies in store right now. I imagine he's working towards a breaking point as second item, which is interesting because classically Jules will move straight for Critical Strike after they've got their Sorrow Blade, but he's looking to play the longer game, maybe looking to stack off Archaic and Playboy, and then move in for the Adagio later on.
Playboy Afro not going to be able to find that engage. There's the Ordained onto Starting. He does get stunned by it and knocked up. Archaic is in a bit of trouble. Playboy just going to walk on backwards there. Just thinking about the breaking point, Best Chuck probably would have been up to about 8 stacks by this point if a fight was to break out like this. So I can certainly see the value if Best Chuck is thinking that he just stacks on the engage from Playboy and Archaic and then dives on top of Starting All Over for some massive damage. An engage from TSM is just poke at this point, and Playboy Afro is going to run straight on into it. He has the fountain up and ready, and they're going to have to try and defend this turret. Burst of Judgment available for Starting All Over if he wants to clear the wave quickly. Archaic dives in, Ordained goes out. TSM will dive onto Playboy, and that's going to be the big red button flying. But of course, on a weapon-powered Jewel, not really going to find the damage.
Also, another thing that you have to consider with the Crucible, by the way, Dalsy, is that you will want to use that if Grace charges in and tries to use her Holy Nova on a Verse of Judgment. Just like that.
Right. Just like that. Yeah, it's going to be Archaic swallowing up Flash X. Flash X has a lot of movement speed, so unless he gets rooted, he might be able to escape this one. Fountain goes out, walking away, but there's the Impale, and that should be him dead. Will Hammers be able to find another engage? No, they don't need it. This massive gold lead TSM has accumulated is being shut down by Hammers. And, you know, Hammers not had the best start to the split here, but they haven't also had Starting All Over. Now, 1 week was due to Starting just not being available. The other week, perhaps unfortunate circumstances. Best Chuck trying to defend this turret, but he will lose his life in the process. And Hammers with Starting All Over just seem like the Hammers we know.
Absolutely, I think they've been doing a really good job here. They're pushing onto this first turret. Could be a big engage, Dalsy.
Yeah, Vonsi will be able to walk them all home. He gets away. Can he survive? Yes, he can because of Divine Intervention. Playboy will be able to secure the turret, but that is that Fearsome Shade just coming out and being so influential for the side of TSM, completely shutting down Hammers. And they're going to look to try and take a turret whilst everyone is dead. They're not managing this aggro right, so perhaps they have to go into Playboy here. Holy Nova, Ordained, he blocks them all and walks away like a boss, but Best Chuck is coming down the lane, and Best Chuck's just going to Thunderstrike this turret to death.
I want to bring up a really interesting point as TSM take their first return turret of the game and accelerate that gold lead a bit further. In a meta dominated by a lot of sustain, like Lyra, like Grace, and even Adagio to an extent, which of these weapon power carries are going to likely pick up a Poison Shiv? I think we could see a game free from Poison Shiv here, Dalsy, because Jewel is unlikely to build one into her kit. And Archaic is going to go the Tension Bow double Tyrant's Monocle build that we've seen become popularized on the weapon power Grumpjaw. This means we're going to have a completely sustained full game. That's actually one of the first times I've seen that, because Poison Shiv has seen such a prevalence in the meta right now, and that's probably better, you would argue, for Hammers, because if Adagio can heal himself in these kind of really tough situations, he might be the difference between him living and surviving, especially with that dive coming out from Bestchuck and FlashX. If you've got the peel there, the heal might make the difference between you dying or living in a team fight.
Yeah, 100%. I've talked to a bunch of European pros about Adagio and his crystal power state. They feel like Poison Shift just completely shuts down his ability. Starting all over going in. Look at the damage onto Von C. He goes down immediately. The fight's so chaotic, but starting all over is nice and safe. We'll just walk away, and Bestchuck going to start taking some damage. Whoop, I say nice and safe. He does take a huge Thunder Strike. That will threaten him much. FlashX wants the kill, but that's a great Gideon wall, just shutting him down. FlashX will be punished, and Hammers are turning the tides, getting themselves an 1,000 gold lead.
I think the Lance was such an important pick here for Hammers. I think it was really good at preventing everything the TSM composition wants to do. If you think about the TSM composition in a nutshell, does it feel quite one-dimensional to you, Dowsey? Because to me, it feels moderately one-dimensional. I think the Batiste offers them some other form of winning a team fight, but for the most part, it's a dive, go hard composition, right? Lance is very good at stopping that from happening, and Playboy Afro has been doing a great job of it. Interesting item choice that we've seen picked up by FlashX here. He has picked up the Atlas Pauldrons, good at shutting down the natural attack speed from the Grumpjaw, and gets a double whammy because of the obvious CP build that comes out on Adagio, which is that alternating current. So again, double whammy for flashing that item. Not often you get a double whammy with a Atlas Pauldrons, Dowsey.
And we're going to talk about FlashX. Let's consider the fact that he has an Eclipse Prism in his inventory. We'll have to talk about it later, as FlashX does go in for a bit of a gauge here. The Eclipse Prism says he's going towards Shadowglass, who have one massive impactful heal from basically 0 to full HP. A lot of people are running Echo on Grace right now, so they can have 2 heals over a fight. But I assume FlashX has decided to go down this route because there's very much like there's not going to be a poison shift, so you're going to be able to save someone's life entirely without having to burn a fountain.
What I might have preferred over the Eclipse Prism, Dowsey, is a rush of War Treads. I might have even preferred that over the Atlas Pauldrons, if I'm perfectly honest, because I think movement speed and the ability to engage is far more important for this team than anything else right now. The ability to rush the Jewel into position and then have the Jewel use her jump after you've seen the Githian wall is for me one of the most important parts of TSM's composition. I might have preferred a good War Treads rush. The way that FlashX is playing, however, to me signals that they might be relying on Von C more than anything and trying to use those Thunder Strikes from afar, trying to use those max range Thunder Strikes to just stack off the front line of Hammers. This might be trying to adapt their composition here.
I'm so impressed with starting all over's play so far. Gets caught in that ordained, but he'll just stand his ground. Look at the damage he's outputting. Bestchuck is in trouble, but there comes that heal. Dives on in, fountain out, starting all over with the Burst of Judgment, looking for the kaboom! But it's going to be him being blown up, and he will lose his life. Bestchuck surviving for now, but goes down. Can they turn this fight? Hammers as Archaic goes forward. Playboy onto Von C, and FlashX just with the Holy Nova to knock everyone up. Archaic jumps on top, but Von C says no! And it will be an ace coming out of TSM.
Man, they were able to get Jewel to the back line there, did so much work stacking that breaking point with the infusion as well. Going up against Archaic, who does not have a weapon power infusion, so he was slightly less impactful. And give massive credit to Von C as well. The sustain that he generates on this Batiste was able to keep him alive in the remainder of that fight. I think Hammers would have been better off trying to use that Grumpjaw ultimate straight away, bursting the Jewel down, then just trying to ignore FlashX as much as possible. And you also got an indicator in that fight about how good Grace is into the likes of a double melee, like Lance and Grumpjaw. Holy Nova shut them down in the middle of their attempt to put pressure onto Von C, and Von C was able then to kite back. If you allow Batiste space, he's one of the easiest ranged mages to sort of end up kiting with without a Frostburn because of the impact that bad mojo makes it very difficult. We've got a fight breaking out.
These guys just want to fight all over, starting all over, gonna block the fear, but he walks into it and then he dies after the block. You can't walk into it. And Knight's Ordained, it's a double for Von C, and Archaic will dive over the wall to his safety. But the Kraken, she's awakened, and TSM are hungry.
Oh man, perfect time for TSM to win a fight as well. I have no idea how starting's taking this much damage at the start of the fight. If you are Lance, you have to be stood on top of starting all over. Every single team fight, you have to be sitting right in front of him. Do not make aggressive impales. As Hammers, you are there to Githian wall and engage away. And then make an impale if you feel like you have the potential to win a team fight following. If you are being aggressive as the Hammers squad, you basically do the hard work for TSM. By engaging and then not getting an immediate kill, which is proving quite difficult for Hammers right now, Dowsey, because you've only got one Tyrant's Monocle on Archaic. He hasn't got that 2 Tyrant's Monocle burst right now. By engaging for TSM, you are doing the hard work for them. They're saying, oh, okay, now we don't have to worry about Githyan Wall because you've just engaged on us, so we can just run at you. So I would like to see Hammers play a little bit more defensively, allow TSM to try and make the first move, and then look for a counter engage.
It has to be stuffed onto one of these carries, I feel. Flash X, yeah, you can stuff him, but will it be enough to keep your team alive? A good Impale does root 2, but will they be able to get the damage out? Best Chuck taking the Ferg, but that fear just pushes them all backwards. Good Githyan Wall will shut down any further damage onto Hammers, but this Kraken's doing work, and TSM very happy to stick around and wear it out. Playboy Afro, he gets blown up, and this Vonzi Baptiste is becoming a nightmare for the side of Hammers as the first turret will go down. A stuff will miss. This is looking like it could just be GG. Flash X diving on top of them. Holy Nova gonna knock up Archaic. He gets blown up. Burst of Judgment will just get blocked by a Crucible. And unless starting on Nova's gonna go God mode, this will be game 1 going to TSM. An explosive match indeed. And it seemingly could have gone either way, but it's of course gonna be TSM taking it.
I think Hammers were in a really hard spot that game. TSM played it incredibly, but we talked about the fact that I felt that they should be defensive. Once Von Z got to this position in the game, where he's got the Clockwork, the Shatterglass, and the Broken Myth, that gives TSM a ranged facet to their composition. And he was able to stack quite consistently, because Bad Mojo is a pretty easy skill to hit every 2 seconds when you've got the Clockwork. So I don't know. I think Hammers were in a hard position, but I think they made some mid-game mistakes by forcing the engages themselves there, Darcy.
Yeah, perhaps we'll get a bit more analysis from our desk about how Hammers could have potentially won that game. That was over in a flash. It was very exciting. We've got more games to come, though.
We certainly do have more games to come, Dowsey, and what a game that was. Hammers actually taking it to TSM right at the start of that game. But as those guys rightly said, once it got towards the mid-game, it started to fall apart. And there was one point at which TSM just seemed to just flick the switch and start destroying these team fights. Let's talk about the early game first, though. What went right for Hammers?
I mean, early on, they were able to find lots of damage onto Von C and Best Chuck before they really got their items online. The very first fight, this was so smart from TSM, though. The rotation of being able to just stall up the enemy jungle, get your jungler to level 2, and then you have a level advantage going into that first fight.
Yeah, for sure. That was a good rotation, and that's what top teams tend to do. They distract with the mid healer, play around, and then it's usually a Koshka, but in this case was a Baptiste level 2 coming over. Then they get 2 kills. Over here, this is where TSM starts to kind of throw, honestly. Vonti just dives onto Adagio, gets a kill, and then they give over 2 kills to Hammers, which kind of puts them back into the game here. And then from there, they start getting picked off. I mean, Playboy Afro had a few good plays with Lance. And you see, one by one, they're picking people off. And this is how Hammers expand. They get a turret off this. It's a 2 versus 3 because they killed Chuck in lane. And this was a good play by Von C with that Fearsome Shade there. Just completely saves them with the Grace Divine Intervention there.
Yeah, but the key thing was Hammers actually did take it to TSM towards the start of the game. They were competitive, and honestly, it was very even when, like, even at this point in the game, the gold was exactly even at the start of this fight.
Yeah, and this is, however, though, when TSM started to get their items online, started to get a lot of burst damage down, and unfortunately, you know Grumpjaw, he was getting denied a little bit, and the damage on to starting all over was immense.
Yeah, that was a beautiful little Githyan Wall from Afro as well, denying the benediction and keeping starting all over alive. So, again, Hammers, great start to the game. However, it did not last forever. TSM, once I said it backstage when I was chatting to production, like watching this game, there is no point at which you feel like TSM is totally out. Even if they're behind, you still feel like, okay, there's a way in here.
Yeah, and you can see they're comboing the Jewel Rocket Leap with the Fearsome Shade. They did that combo multiple times as he would get a Fearsome Shade and then Jewel would jump in the direction the team is running away to get a stun, which is actually pretty smart and clever of TSM. And as long as Von C did not die in these fights, they won the fight. So in every fight that Hammers won, they'd normally get on Von C and delete him. But since then, they could not complete that win condition, and that's why they started losing most of their fights, because they could not kill Von C, and he was carrying a lot of these fights for sure.
Yeah, and Vonsi, you know, he was the player to watch. Batiste is his new most played this season, and you can see why. Like, I think his final scoreline there was something like 926 or something obscenely great. Like, he's more than happy to go very aggressive with his build paths as well. Just go straight towards that broken mid.
Yeah, and they need to not fight, and they need to back off when Vonsi is empowered. Like, Batiste empowered does double the ability damage. They need to be very cautious, and they can't group up, because when Batiste lands a mojo on 2 or 3 people, he gets a soul fragment for every single hero that the mojo hits. So you can give him 3 soul fragments just by landing 1 mojo on 3 people.
Yeah, it can be devastating to your team. Let's start to talk about the draft as we're heading towards game 2. What needs to change here for Hammers when, I mean, they did a great job of banning out Best Chuck in the last game, and then he played Jewel and they still win. Like, where do you go from here as Hammers Bacon?
I think you really can't focus any one role against Team Solo Mid because they all have deep enough hero pools that they will have something they're comfortable on. You have to try and just focus against certain compositions, like specific strategies. Obviously, the Batiste is a very burst-focused strategy, Batiste Jewel. So you have to try and figure out a way that if you feel like TSM wants to go heavy burst, you have to try and take away as much of those heavy burst heroes off the board as possible.
So try and predict their strategy and build your draft around that. Is there an argument to Hammers kind of really focusing on their own strategy instead of trying to draft around their opponents, just trying to build a very strong strategy and try and execute that perfectly?
Yeah, I think they shouldn't give Grace over if they don't have a hard counter, because Grace is actually good into Grumpjaw or any type of melee that wants to get onto one of the carries. So Grace actually works well into Grumpjaw, so I feel like if they want to run Grumpjaw, maybe ban Grace or something and let TSM take Lyra, etc. But I think giving TSM the Batiste-Grace combo was too strong.
Especially once Fox was already banned by TSM. That is one of the hardest counters to the Grace, or one of the best heroes to play into a Grace. So once that's off the board, I feel like Grace is a must ban at that point. But Hammers with the first ban, they have... I think this first ban is going to be pretty telling of where they kind of want to go, or if they're just going to stick to the meta, the kind of the standard picks and bans. But it is going to be the Grace taken off the board, so they don't want to play that themselves.
Yeah, Hammers has banned Grace actually on A side if you look at their previous history of draft. TSM normally bans Grace as well on B side, but since Grace is already banned for them, they'll most likely probably take Vox or Baron off the board. So Vox will be banned here. That leaves Baron open, so I think Hammers will either go with Baron, Grumpjaw, or Lyra. They're all 3 good picks. And they all could work well for Hammers. And we saw a starting player, really solid Baron actually last season.
And it all tells, each of those 3 picks, while they're all great, tell a different story about how Hammers wants to play this game.
And the thing about the Baron pick for Hammers, though, is when Starting played it, it was always with a very specific composition. It was the Baron Glaive Koshka that they ran it with the vast majority of the time. I think there was 1 game where they played Baron without that composition. But without picking that, it is now giving a potential Baron to Best Chuck. And at least obviously not during the season because it's been banned so frequently, but in his solo queue, that's one of the most played heroes for Best Chuck and one of his higher win rates as
Which is honestly impressive, to be honest, because like it's not often that Baron actually gets through bans in solo queue.
Yeah, I think Adagio may be a good ban here for TSM, or they could ban maybe potentially Idris, but I think Adagio is a good ban, so that opens Lyra for them. But they actually go ahead and ban Glaive instead. Now Lyra is open still. If Hammers doesn't take Lyra here, I feel like TSM is probably going to take Lyra. So they're going to go ahead and ban Lyra. Now Adagio is also a composition that Adagio, Grumpjaw, Hammers can run again. However, Batiste is still open. So I feel like TSM here could potentially take a captain and just basically use the last pick as a huge counter pick. So I feel like Arden is probably the best pick here with the Baron composition.
Well, we saw a whole lot of Arden focus over in Europe.
Yeah.
See if that transfers a little bit here to North America. And Flash X has been a big Arden player, but they're going to grab the Adagio,
and just
taking away that combo from Hammers.
Yeah, I mean, Arden Grumpjaw isn't exactly bad either. You're more than happy to jump on into the fight alongside a Grumpjaw. We'll see what they are going to opt to go for here, but the double pick available for Hammers, so they can decide how they actually want to finish out this composition. Obviously, Grumpjaw very aggressive in the early game. They can decide whether they want to commit to that or use that as a facility to get them to the late game and pick something a little bit more late game focused for the final couple.
Yeah, we have Idris open. Idris could be a potential carry for starting all over in the lane here. There's also Ringo if he wants to play Ringo into a Baron. There's Gwen open and available. There's a few options here, but I feel like Arden will be their captain that they'll probably pick here, most likely. Oh, they're going to go with Fortress, actually. And I think they're going to round this out with most likely Ringo or Idris.
Okay, so explain the Fortress to me, because this is something that we see very rarely here in the Vainglory8.
Yeah, Fortress Grumpjaw is really strong because Grumpjaw has the innate, his Hangry gives him extra attack speed, so it's really good to proc the mortal wounds and bleed that Fortress provides from his Law of the Claw B ability. So, and also the A, they have two gap closers, a Truth of the Tooth, which allows the entire team to rush onto the enemy carry, and also Grumpjaw has the A that he can just busy dive in. So Ringo will be picked in. Most likely is to probably be a CP Ringo with a weapon Grumpjaw here.
I don't know if it will be a CP Ringo, but at the same time, Ringo last season was the pick for starting all over. This was his most comfortable pick. You know, people were calling him a Ringo one trick, and his response was always just, well, it's my most comfortable hero. If it's available, why am I not going to pick it? So this is the definition of a comfort pick for the side of Hammers. It's just a question of will it be enough to contend with a Baron from Best Chuck. Comfort picks all around in the lane.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, looking across the compositions, it feels like TSM have a very standard composition for last season. And then on the side of Hammers, you've got this composition that's a little bit weird in that you've got the Fortress and the Ringo, but at the same time, it's like clearly something that they're comfortable on and clearly something that they're quite happy to go into. So how are we feeling about this matchup now that we see the whole composition is locked in? What are the win conditions going to be?
I really like Grumpjaw Fortress. Once Fortress turns level 6 and Grumpjaw has a lot of damage, hopefully they're going to go weapon Grumpjaw here. If not, then I'm going to give the game to TSM. But if they go weapon Grumpjaw or CP Ringo, I actually like the composition from Hammers better because Fortress is going to enable them, and they're going to do so much damage and blow up Koshka or Baron right off the bat.
Yeah, if they can get onto the Baron, that's going to be the key to victory for the side of Hammers. But at the same time, I'm a little bit concerned for Hammers because their composition is very, very squishy. They do not have a dedicated tank. No, it's not a whole lot of beefiness on their side. And so there is the risk that Koshka and Baron just blow them up before they can even get to the backline.
So with Hammers where they are in the standings right now, they're relatively close to challenge battles and they only have 2 weeks remaining. Every single game counts. Even if you can't win this series, just getting a single game at that single point might be the difference. Do we think that Hammers have what it takes to use this composition and really push that early game pressure with a Grumpjaw and actually take enough of a lead to challenge TSM here?
I think so. As long as Archaic can win or stay even with Von C outplays him on Koshka and snowballs jungle, it's done. But if they can stop Koshka aggression and Grumpjaw can get that tensionable monocle build, they have a great chance of winning this game for sure.
I think the burst damage coming out of Team Still Mid Best Chuck on the comfort pick of Baron, I think it's just going to be too much for Hammers to handle.
Okay, so you think TSM are going to be too comfortable going on into this one and just going to be on cruise control to head on into another victory. They've been looking phenomenal so far, but we're just waiting for one of the players to be ready before we can actually jump on into this series. So let's just discuss a little bit more as well, because, you know, Hammers, in the early game, like we said, they managed to actually do some serious work against TSM. But TSM, even when they're even when they're behind, there's always that little voice in the back of your head saying TSM could come back into this. It never quite feels like TSM are out of the running. What is it about this team that makes them so strong? Why is it that it always feels like they have a way back into it?
They're very focused, and one thing that TSM does really, really well that I give them the best marks on is the macro. They understand their win conditions completely. You can see how many times they combo that Fearsome Shade with the Jewel Jump, and they time the Fearsome Shade at the right moments when the enemy team is diving onto them, and then when they use a Fearsome Shade, they counter-engage really hard. So I feel like TSM understands how their compositions work, and they execute the combos as it's meant to be played, and that's what makes TSM shine.
Okay, well, we'll see if they're going to shine in this game. Don't forget to let us know who you're supporting. Is it the Hollywood Hammers or is it TSM? Hashtag Vainglory8 is the way to get in touch on Twitter. But with that, it's about time we head on into this second game for North America. Hammers against TSM. Let's do this.
What an interesting draft we have here today, Scoundrel. Basically, with that Glaive ban, second rotation from TSM, they challenged Starting All Over to pick Idris into their Baron, and Starting All Over has gone back to his old faithful, which is Ringo.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. I think I'm definitely on board with Suijay. I want to see a weapon power Grumpjaw. I think you'll get absolutely destroyed if you wanted to go CP Grumpjaw versus a Koshka, and you want to be able to punish her level 2 because you have a really good level 2 composition. It looks like we're going to have a... This is weird. Okay, now we've got Flash X and Best Chuck moving to take the forward healing tree on to deny level 2 from Archaic here.
Yeah, but on the other side of the map, Starting All Over and Playboy Afro have done exactly the same thing. They're actually going to move in and just try and batter Archaic. TSM just changing the level 1 here. Archaic does get his camps, but he is forced right back. He's going to have to recall, heal up, and he's not going to have a fun time. Maybe starting to do some damage here as they're being challenged, but Vonsi moves in. He has level 2. They're looking for a kill. Playboy Afro will be able to get away, but man, these level 1s from these North American teams are completely different than what we see across the pond.
There were so many things that went on there, Dalsy, that made that so interesting. TSM had to know that with a Fortress, they were going to try and be aggressive at level 1. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made that play to go for their forward healing tree. They must have known that this was the best way to avoid a conflict with the Fortress early on. Then, they must have... The only way for them, for Hammers to punish that, was to push the lane, right? The only way to punish a Baron making that kind of rotation is to push the lane, try and force some creeps to die to turret, because then you force Baron to lose some creep score. But because of the rotation that Von C made, they knew that without the Grumpjaw, because he'd been taken so low, that they couldn't fight that, and suddenly TSM got the best of both worlds. That was some next level early gameplay from TSM right there, and it made it very difficult for Hammers to even get a way to punish TSM for that kind of move, despite trading those forward healing trions.
It's like set plays are coming into Vainglory at the moment, Scoundrel. TSM, they've got their game book, they've been studying it hard. They know exactly what they want to be doing at level 1. It's seemingly going to be this weapon power Grumpjaw that people have been asking for, but also a potential weapon power Ringo. So when you think of that, you then think it's going to be on-hit Grumpjaw going a tension bow aftershock build.
Yeah, this is the way that I think it's going to pan out here. It's going to be that tension bow aftershock build for the Grumpjaw, which I think is the worst way to play into this composition, because I like the ability with weapon power Grumpjaw and a CP Ringo to burst a singular target very quickly, which I think is very useful against a Koshka and a Baron, even against the Adagio as well to an extent. Looks like they're going to go aggressive.
Best Chuck, very comfortable just using those jump jets defensively, gets a heal. Vonsi's moved up to lane as well. Knowing that there's aggression and they might go for it again, does make that rotation. He's walked all the way over, not been spotted yet. That flare from Playboy Afro may lure Hammers into a false sense of security. They dive on forward, starting low, takes a huge jump, but Vonsi gets destroyed. It's Archaic coming in, and he's blowing them up on this Grumpjaw. Insane counter gank from Hammers.
Yeah, really well timed. Starting also having the boots early on meant that he was able to escape that. I think it was a bit ambitious, especially with the Baron this early on. It was very ambitious to go for that kind of level of damage onto starting here. But again, the one thing that Weapon Power Ringo does give you over the CP Ringo is the ability to put pressure on a Baron early on, right? So this is going to be a very early focused pressure composition from Hammers, because I feel if they get to late game, I don't know how well they stand up to the Baron. You always have the Grumpjaw ultimate to bail you out of team fights. If you can land that onto a key target, then you force a 2 versus 3, then it's always possible. The problem I have with Weapon Power Ringo though, Dalsy, is you are going to need to put a Poison Shiv in this build. But I think you need Critical Strike, and I think you also potentially need Breaking Point. The way I would build Ringo here would be Sorrow Blade, Poison Shiv, Tyrant's Monocle, and then you either go a Tornado Trigger or another Tyrant's Monocle, because you need to maximize your Critical Strike. But I feel like a Breaking Point is such a good pickup for Ringo this game as well, because it gives him some longevity in team fights while Grumpjaw is soaking damage. I don't know, I think we'll have to see how this pans out. Starting knows best. Another lot of damage coming down.
That's Fountain burnt already. Playboy Afro holding on to his. You can see what Hammers are attempting to do here. With an on-hit on this Grumpjaw, and with a Fortress to just get him straight on top of the Baron. They're looking to blow him up before he gets a chance to jump away and heal. Usually into Baron compositions, you find an Arden as your captain so you can lock him into a fight as soon as he's used his jump jets. But Hammers, they're just going for the straight and direct route of just killing him before he escapes.
You do have the Achilles shot to follow up the Baron jump jets, so, you know, if Baron jump jets, you can land an Achilles shot, potentially then use War Treads to rush in, or if you've used War Treads to engage the fight, potentially then use Archaic to jump in and finish the deal. So there is always those sort of little nuances that you can look to approach this game with, but I think this is now a time for Hammers to start putting pressure on, because they've got the tension bow finished for Archaic. Starting has now finished his Sorrow Blade. Big item spikes coming out for them. They had that Fountain advantage and weren't able to push it. Fountain is now back up for Flash X. Could be a good time. Vonsi hasn't yet finished an item, so this is a pretty decent time, I think, for Hammers to search for some sort of pressure on the map.
Certainly is, and you know, we'll have to see if they can do that. Oh, that's a great Yummy Company Frenzy. That's starting just dead before Playboy Afro is able to counter. And Vonsi walks away. A happy little kitty cat. Now, we'll have to see if TSM can lay down enough damage onto this turret to find an objective for themselves. Getting a kill into Starting All Over certainly helps their cause. That's a lot of CS going down the drain for the laner of Hammers. And a bit of damage onto the turret, TSM will be happy with that.
Yeah, and Starting actually went straight invested into a reflex block. Lessons learned the hard way for Starting here. I love that Vonsi was able to just pull the trigger with Koshka there. There is a good time to pull a trigger with Koshka when you get your ultimate, and that's pretty much as soon as physically possible. If you see that a carry does not have a reflex block, there is no way for a carry to block the Koshka ultimate. So, you know, it's just so easy to just throw it on them and see what happens. And I think that was a really good, decisive move from Vonsi there. I'm interested to see whether he goes towards the Aftershock or whether he goes towards a Shatterglass, because I feel like he's working towards a Shatterglass for maximum damage onto Starting.
We'll have to see. That's going to be Best Chuck diving away as Vonsi comes in. Doesn't quite have that Yummy Company Frenzy up in 18 seconds. Fountain burned by Hammers as they throw that Hellfire Brew straight into Vonsi's reflex block. TSM in a great position right now to continue this fight, especially with that Yummy Company Frenzy coming up in just a second. They can look for a siege here. They're going to throw the Iron Cannon on top of the turret and will do a significant amount of damage. Hammers, they want to fight, it seems. If they can find a stuffed onto perhaps Flash X, then they might be able to blow up someone, and the Fountain obviously won't be available to save them.
Going to continue to shove this lane in. That's the Aftershock built now, so we'll do a lot of damage to both Archaic and also to Starting All Over. TSM not quite dominating yet. It is 1-1 right now. There's not a huge amount of gold between these two teams at this point in time. Archaic is working towards his Aftershock. He's also picked up a very early infusion. I guess he's going to try and pop that around level 8 and look to fight with it then. So this could be a small area of the game that Hammers look to exploit, where they have that infusion advantage. It doesn't look like TSM have invested in anything yet. Maybe Vonsi picks one up with the next sort of 500 gold threshold that he meets, but Archaic definitely has one in the bag here, meaning he definitely wants to fight with this level 8 infusion sometime soon.
Yep, and he is moving into the lane now. Will they be able to do it? There's Vonsi's infusion coming out, as mentioned. Hammers pushing forward. Playboy Afro gonna lead the charge. Obviously has that contract as well. If his teammates can get on top of Best Chuck or Vonsi, he's going to do a significant burst of damage. Starting All Over is going to be the key to this picture. He kind of has to bait TSM in and then be able to output damage as he escapes, survives. Bit of chunk onto him as Best Chuck has his tension bow now. This Baron comes online a little bit sooner with the tension bow build. Archaic goes in, that's Vonsi swallowed up. He's going to fly back out towards his turret, but he's going very low, and Vonsi's able to finish him off. Diving forward, Fountain comes out from Playboy.
So late.
Way
so
too late. And then
Way too late
Vonsi's just going to walk
on the
away.
Fountain there. So late because Archaic just got blown up as well. And again, Starting All Over, he played that fight as if he was expecting Archaic to deliver something on a plate without having taken any damage whatsoever. Starting refused to take an aggressive position in that team fight because the whole idea of that team fight for Hammers was, wait a second.
Starting is just dead. That's Tension Bow Baron. And Vonsi obviously on this Koshka, it's one of his comfort picks. We saw it so often in last season. Vonsi may lose his life to Archaic, he does, as he dives back in to end things quickly, but TSM, it feels, actually have the tempo with a Baron at 10 minutes.
Yeah, again, Tension Bow does provide that, Dalsy, like you said. I also want to point out that the way that Hammers played that fight where they did lose and eventually lost the turret from, again, they played it as if Archaic was going to deliver a target scot-free and then that was going to allow Starting to blow them up. Starting just had a Sorrow Blade. He's not got any critical strike. He didn't have anything else to sort of aid that kind of move. As I think Archaic just going to get out of here. And he did no damage in the first 5 seconds of that fight, whereas the whole TSM team had coordinated to then start putting damage and wailing on Archaic there. So that was a very interesting move by Starting. I think it was far too risky of a situation to play that defensive in that there. He could have been aggressive to Flash X. He could have been trying to push Best Chuck out, and then they turned on. But I guess he was so afraid of once he's Koshka. So afraid as once he's Koshka as that team fight breaks out that he wanted to stay behind the turret, Dalsy.
That was, I think, a single auto attack coming out of Best Chuck. He jumps Jets, got the 2 swift auto attacks. That's a very dead Starting All Over. It makes you wonder if Slumbering Husk is an item that we'll see coming out today from Starting All Over. Obviously got updated in 2.5 and, you know, provides more health, provides the fortified health on a shorter cooldown. Right now, TSM just pushing, you know, it further with this gold miner. They're going to swallow up the Adagio, and Vonsi's going to jump back in. Archaic, though, he's just getting bursted on down. Great Verse of Judgment catches up Hammers, and it's just going to be clean up. Best Chuck trying to find the last auto attack onto Starting, but he's too slow. What a Verse of Judgment coming out of Flash X.
Yeah, and again, just the Crucible used a little bit early from Play by Afro. I don't think they managed to block that, which is probably the most important ability to think about. And Best Chuck now, with almost 3 items at that point, the damage coming out from this Baron is starting to ramp up. And this is only 11 minutes into the game, Dowsey. Insane. A lot of people might be wondering as well why you often see infusions picked up around level 8, especially for the junglers. It's because that's the first time that you overdrive your first ability. So you usually get some sort of massive beneficial effect from overdriving your first ability, and the fact that gold mine is usually stacked by this point. And usually that's the point where you're trying to contest some sort of neutral objective like a first tier turret. So you know that you will fight at some point around the jungler level 8 because there's usually something to fight over, and you've just overdrived your first ability. So that's often why you see level 8 infusions come out, because it's one of the sort of the key power spikes in the game.
Ooh. Hammers can't afford to fight at the moment. Maybe they can, but here comes Best Chuck and dives straight on top. The fountain this time will be good enough, but Playboy Afro in a bit of trouble. Hammers can't afford to fight right now, Scoundrel. Starting's build provides no burst, no actual damage. It needs to ramp up, and it's going to be Archaic paying for it with a jump forward from Best Chuck. That double shot comes out. Ion Cannon flies down, and it's Starting All Over. Isolated, he goes down for a double kill. This turret falls. You just have to question the order of items perhaps from Starting All Over. Yes, Breaking Point perhaps needed here at Scoundrel like you mentioned, but as a second item, it doesn't provide enough damage to fight the Baron.
I'm actually going to roll this back all the way to the initial decision behind where they were going to put their carries in terms of what build paths they were going to take. With a Weapon Power Ringo and an on-hit Grumpjaw, especially with a Fortress, you have to win the first 8 minutes of the game, and you have to take that snowball and run with it. If you don't, especially allowing Von C to get ahead, that way of building your composition with the on-hit Grumpjaw and the Weapon Power Ringo is straight up worse against the Baron as the game progresses. Just straight up worse. Especially, like you said, the way that Starting has prioritized these items. I did think that a Breaking Point was going to be fairly necessary, but I also think a Poison Shiv is incredibly necessary because you're going up against the Captain Adagio. His heals are going to be fairly strong because he stacks that health. And the fact that Flash has got a blinking Null Wave Gauntlet in there as well. That's crazy. You didn't even notice that. I would have much preferred to see the CP Ringo and the Weapon Power Grumpjaw, because Weapon Power Grumpjaw beats Koshka in the jungle, and CP Ringo will scale, especially with Alternating Current. You can act almost like a ranged carry Ringo, and you have that burst of the Hellfire Brew.
I think I would prefer to see a Weapon Power Grumpjaw in the lane, perhaps, and just find a burst CP jungler, but, you know, that's just me and my off-meta ways, perhaps, Scoundrel. You know, it seems like Baron needs...
You're obsessed with playing Grumpjaw, buddy.
Well,
you're obsessed
I play it into Baron so many times, this Scoundrel, and Baron can't deal with it in the lane. He just can't, because the base damage from Grumpjaw is too insane. So if you were to translate that into something perhaps more meta, being a Weapon Power Grumpjaw in the jungle, then you just punish. Here's a Hellfire Brew straight onto Best Chuck, a bit of damage onto him. They're going to dodge out that yummy Captain Frenzy. Versus Judgment goes out. It stuns Playboy Afro. He is dead to all rights. And it's going to be Best Chuck NA picking up his 5th kill in this game. TSM just storming. And with 10 seconds till the Kraken spawns, I think Hammers are out for the count.
I think Hammers have been out for the count for a while, Towsy.
They've been getting up and fighting.
If Hammers had been out for the count now, I don't know what they've been doing for the last 5 minutes of the game. Yeah, this is the point where you're just getting destroyed by a Baron with 4. I mean, do we need to explain any more than a Baron with 4 items, Dalsy? I don't know if we do. This is a Baron with 4 items and very little way to punish him in team fights.
Until starting all over gets crit, until he hits a point where he's perhaps matching an item build, then there is no hope really for Hammers, unless Archaic somehow finds the magical flank, but it's not going to happen because FlashX, his control over vision this game has been phenomenal. You see these red scout traps being popped everywhere Hammers go, and yes, this is great for Hammers, they're finally clearing vision, but there's just so much of it. They haven't even cleared out half the vision in this mid area. They will finally find another, but TSM are able to walk wherever they want without risk of running into a Grumpjaw, who's perhaps the only chance of Hammers to actually kill this Baron in a fight.
So the way that Hammers actually win a fight is ulting Flash X and trying to burst someone.
Yep.
I think that's the only way that Hammers win a fight here. And that'll be pretty hard to do, especially if Flash X can predict and Crucible the Grumpjaw ultimate, which I think is probably the only thing that you're worried about Crucibling, really. I mean, nothing else really strikes me as being warranted of a Crucible apart from maybe... I mean, even a Weapon Power Hellfire Brew is not that big of a deal, and everyone has their own personal reflex blocks for that. So I think the only thing you're concerned about is trying to predict that Grumpjaw ultimate, which can be hard to do, but...
Playboy just takes so much damage. The Kraken does get reset, though, in the process. He will have to go back to base, it seems. Maybe
do we hark back to draft here, Dalsy? Because me and you were discussing draft, and we were saying, this is very NA, this draft. Like, I guess it's rich of us to say
question
because
if the metas were that different than what we see in Europe. Is that different to NA? It's Hammers going in for a fight here, but it's going to be starting blocking that stun. Will be Fortress going down though, and Best Chuck dives forward. He may lose his life here. This might be Best Chuck dying. In fact, it will be. But it is a trade of Archaic starting all over, looking for Von C, but Von C's looking for stun.
Wait a minute,
Can he start to survive? He can't. He can't. The heal just too much from Flash X. It is going to be this Kraken going over, an ace for TSM. I guess if you want to talk about drafts, because Arden was available, Idris was available, these heroes just known for shutting down Baron in team fights, it seemed bonkers that you wouldn't pull them. You know, weapon-powered Grumpjaw and CP Idris, it could also be a possibility, considering that CP Idris is one of the best late-game carries, and you have that weapon-powered Grumpjaw as a threat. I just don't understand what Hammer's thought process was in their drafting period.
I love what Flash X did there, holding the Kraken until Best Chuck was able and ready to then join the team to follow up on the Kraken push to get maximum effectiveness out of it. It's not something that you see a lot of teams do, but because the ace just came through, TSM knew they had a huge period of time where they were not going to be contested at Kraken, so holding it was the right decision there. Easy to then now capitalize on that with the full team. You don't waste Kraken time this way. But again, I think you're right. I was thinking in my head, like, oh, just draft even a Black Feather, like even just something to pressure a Baron that harder than a Ringo could. And then draft an Arden, which I've always liked into Baron. But this is a very aggressive draft from Hammers, but they weren't aggressive enough to make it work.
Yeah, that's going to be the Yummy Captain Frenzy going in. Bonzi in the middle of the fight has that Broken Myth stacking up, and Playboy Afro, he's been silenced by the Null Wave. He goes down. No ability to use any of his items there. FK gets denied with a Crucible, and he's the only man standing for now as he attempts to defend his base, but TSM will deny him, taking game 2 of this series, making it look easy.
TSM, I think they've made everything look easy. There's something I talked about last week where I just feel like the likes of TSM and C9 are currently way ahead in the boat race in terms of their potential and their ability in the North American scene right now. I think Gangstars are sort of closing the gap. I think they definitely are closing the gap. But TSM right now, even they are sort of stomping over C9 on this current split of the VG8. They look unstoppable, Dalsy. TSM look incredible. And Hammers made the mistake here. I think Hammers had an opportunity and they didn't take it.
Yeah, I agree there. An opportunity with their chosen draft, perhaps an opportunity back in the drafting lobby. Either way, it's a 2-0 to TSM as we progress deeper into this North American BG8.
It certainly was a 2-0 to TSM. I couldn't have said it better myself. And a convincing 2-0 at that. TSM maintaining their stalwart performance here in North America, moving on into the semifinals. You know, it was a relatively predictable result, right? You go into this series expecting TSM to be the favorite, but that second series, honestly, TSM kind of just putting their foot down right there.
Yeah, this was Team Zolamid, again,